we will bring our first keynote speaker here. Well known in Plone community. Let's give a warm welcome to Timo Stollenwerk.
Thank you. If you work as a software engineer, every few years there's a new big trend. And when it comes to big trends, I tend to make bad life choices and miss opportunities. When I had to choose my first programming language, that was in 2000. I was a computer science student in my first or second year, and I wanted to get into web programming because that catch my interest. At school, I think I learned Visual Basic and Java at university. So the four choices that I had back then were Perl, Python, Java, and PHP. And I did some research, tried to find the pros and cons, tried to make an educated choice. But after 1 week, I got so tired. I didn't felt that I could make a good decision, so I just chose PHP. Because it was the most popular one. A year or so later, I wanted to choose my first CMS because I realized that things became more complex and I might need something. So I looked around. I think I checked out Drupal, Joomla, Typo3, and maybe Plone. I'm not sure about that, to be honest. But at that time, I also checked the source code of the systems and the UI. And even though I was a student in my first or second year, I didn't like what I saw there in terms of like code quality and stuff like that. I had the feeling that I could do better actually. So I wrote my own CMS, which was a stupid idea, of course. But it was kind of a recurring theme. All of my friends also wrote their own CMS. So yeah, common mistake, right? But I made them all. So at that time, I was hanging around a lot at this place, which was called Netzladen, which translates to network shop. It was run by a local hacker organization, the Chaos Computer Club, and different other groups. And I was spending my nights there drinking Club Mate, long before it became cool and Berlin people picked it up, right? And it was a vibrant and diverse community with lots of like cool ideas and everything. And one of the ideas that was discussed back then, and that was 2003, 2004, right? So 4 to 5 years before the first Bitcoin paper came out, they discussed cryptocurrencies. And I was pretty much skeptic and not really interested, to be honest. I have to admit, even to this day, I'm not really interested in that. So I completely skipped that trend. But I'm not rich today, right? That's a thing, like others. But there was something that catch my interest back then, which was the Zope user group was meeting there. Zope was a big thing back then in Germany and elsewhere. And this way I learned more about Plone. And then in like one evening, there was a like small sheet of paper on this wall of this old building with no heating. And someone was looking for was posting a job offer. They were looking for a Python and Plone developer. And I thought like, I checked out that Plone system and it was like different programming language that I don't know, another database that I have no clue about, new template language. So I'm completely clueless, but if someone would pay me to learn that cool system, that would be pretty nice. So I showed up, I said, I have no clue, I know PHP, but I'm motivated to learn it. And they hired me. So this is how I got into the Plone world. And the Plone world was really a complete new world for me and a complete paradigm shift, to be honest. Because as said, I wrote PHP, I run into a wall, I encountered something that lots of people, I think, encounter when they first start to program. They feel on the top of the world and feel that they can do everything. I had a student job back then, and I was driving cars and testing navigation system. And at some point they asked me if I could write them a database where they can add test cases to. And I told them, yeah, sure, I can do that in 2 days, no problem. And of course I failed. I was writing the worst spaghetti code you can imagine, and it became an unmaintainable mess over time. And that was one of the big failures in my career, but one of the most important ones, because I realized that if you don't think about architecture and stuff, you will fail, right? No matter how cool you think you are. So, and as said, when I looked at the other PHP CMSs around there, I didn't like the architecture. They weren't doing any better than I did, to be honest. And with Plone, it was quite the opposite. When I started to read the source code quite at the beginning, because that was before lots of things happened on the internet, and I was part of the Plone community. So I had to learn it on my own, and I read the source code. And I was blown away by lots of the things that I saw. I'm not sure if I should say that, but things like acquisition, that's at least an architectural paradigm, right? Not that's a good one from today's perspective, of course, but that was completely new for me. I realized instantaneously that those were smart people and I could learn something from that. And to be honest, I never looked back, right? I found everything in the Plone community that I was looking for, like smart people, mentors, people that I could help with. So yeah, it was a complete new world for me. But the trends, they stayed, right? So I wasn't around in 1995 when Brendan Eich wrote JavaScript, of course. That was too early for me. I was writing, I think, my first HTML at that time with Dreamweaver, I think. But once I got into the Plone world, my first encounter with JavaScript was in Plone 2. Something, I'm not sure about that, the autocomplete search. And that was black magic for me, both from the code and that you could type something and something would pop up. That was like a complete new thing, right? So that was complete magic, and I never really checked that out. When KSS came out in Plone 3, I was super skeptic. So in Martin Aspelli's famous professional Plone development book, I think I read every chapter at least 10 times, and I completely skipped the KSS chapter. I never read it, I think. And that might surprise you if you know my role in Volto and Plone 6, right? Most people might think that I'm always pushing for latest technology and stuff, but that's, when I look at my history, that's actually not true. But there were other people in the community that were innovators, like Balazs Rie or Godfrey Chappelle, who wrote KSS long before jQuery or jQuery tools. We wrote pattern slip. People like Rob or Rock, they used React on the first day it came out. There were many more that actually did that. I was more of a skeptic when that came out, right? I hated React at first. The current mega trend that we have these days is artificial intelligence, or how I still prefer to call it machine learning. And I first heard about that, apart from university neural networks and stuff, that was always that I never really got in the first place anyways. But the first time I was hearing the term machine learning and introduced to it was when Ramon approached me, I think 10 years ago, in 2015 at EuroPython in Bilbao. I think it was the first EuroPython. So that was 10 years ago. So Ramon approached me, also long-term Plone community member. He approached me and he was totally enthusiastic about machine learning. He told me, this is the new thing, this is so great. He explained everything to me, and I was like always, I was a skeptic, right? I thought about, okay, this neural networks and the math behind it is not new. We are just throwing computing power at it, right? So for years, I cited Josef Weizenbaum. He wrote a pretty cool book after, so he wrote ELIZA, this command line interface that makes you think that you're interacting with a human being in the 80s. And after that, he wrote a book about how people perceive that and what people imagine what this could do. And I went to a museum in Bonn a few months ago where they have the source code of ELIZA, and it's I don't know, 80 lines or so of code. So from today's standards, that's nothing. I was so skeptic about that my brother is in AI, and he's a researcher, way better and smarter than me, and better in math at me and smarter. And when I visited him in Stockholm where he works, I read 3 books about AI, but not to learn about it, but just to prove him wrong and tell him that this is just bogus snake oil selling, right? So you see a pattern here that I'm actually pretty skeptic when it comes to new things. And there's this Gauss-like curve from the book Crossing the Chasm. And I picture myself really pretty much on the right side being a skeptic in discussions. I don't think that I'm a tech enthusiast, an innovator or anything when I look at myself. However, when I look at the retrospective and the big picture here, I think I'm actually on the left side. But the reason for this is that I'm surrounded by smart people and by innovators. And I think the open source community and the Plone community in particular, smart and innovative people are drawn to those communities because they're open, we're engaging, we're talking, we're discussing things, right? So I think I'm in an environment where I have zero doubts or zero fears of missing out like a new trend. I mean, trends come and go and some stay, some don't. But I have, as said, no FOMO, no fear of missing out anything. If you look at AI at Plone Conference, you can also see that, of course, right? We have talks about vibe coding. Andreas Jung will talk about that. I already heard that talk in German. It's pretty good. I started vibe coding myself, 5 to 10 projects just in my free time. Maybe I will give a lightning talk about that if I have time. We have a PLIP already for an MCP that stands for Model Context Protocol, which is kind of the idea that you connect systems to an AI agent and that allows the AI agent to do things. So if you think about like a Plone MCP, you can basically go to your Claude or Chat GPT and say, hey, publish a news item, right? And it will interact with the MCP, with the REST API. So maybe Dante wants to give a lightning talk on that. I think there's another talk here at the conference who will talk about MCP. We also have talks about running your own LLM, integrating AI with a chatbot or with a blog. Rob will talk about that for sure in his talk, so I recommend going there. He already gave me a private tour, so that's pretty cool what he did. And I guess everybody these days is using Claude, ChatGPT, or Perplexity or something else on a daily basis, right? So that's pretty exciting times, actually. And I'm happy to be in the Plone community in such exciting times. But there's a reality on the other side of things that I see as a business owner. There's no fear of missing out. There's actually a quite opposite effect. When I look in particular at the CMS market. The CMS market in Germany, and I think that's true worldwide, our main competitors are systems like Drupal, Typo 3, those classical CMSs that Plone also used to be before we introduced Volto. And if you look at them from a technology point of view or an architectural point of view, they're ancient. They use schemas to define content. They have user interfaces still like in the 2000s. And I remember as a young student seeing the first CMSs even before Typo 3 and stuff, and I was horrified by the schemas. But we're still doing that. And this is real competition that we have as a business owner, right? And this is a reality that lots of our clients actually live in, right? So there is a huge gap between the reality that I see as a business owner and the innovation that happens in our industry. So, in my opinion, Plone is pretty unique in that market, actually, in terms that it's the only true open source CMS that has a modern JavaScript stack and that has a long history and a successful history, that has a Plone Foundation, a legal basis, which is important, which lots of new projects lack. We have a security team. We have security processes, which is also something that even mature CMSs often lack. And if you look at our competitors, of course, we have other competitors that have a modern stack, right? A modern UI. There's WordPress. You might have encountered and heard about the WordPress drama where two large companies are fighting with each other. That's not true open source, in my opinion, right? This is a risk if you invest into Drupal, into WordPress. Also, if WordPress is enterprise ready is debatable, but that's another thing, right? You have systems on the market that try to do what we did as Plone community, like Typo 3 and Neos. Sorry when I talk about German market-specific stuff. But what happened there is the community split up. So they wrote their own Volto system, which is called Neos, from scratch, a modern system, not bad. and it didn't went off. Too many community members just stayed with the old system, and they're stuck with a system that's just ancient, and they didn't change anything, right? Because they said, hey, we're going to stick with what we have, and we're going to rewrite from scratch, and there's nothing in between. So you can choose between the old and the new. You have software as a service offers or modern front-end components. You can use Gutenberg or fancy block editing tools, which look amazing. But they're always new on the market, and every few years they go away. And you can, of course, use those components for one project with a classical CMS if you want, or a headless CMS, whatever. So you can use Drupal and have a fancy Next.js front-end, which is fast to build and nice, and you have kind of a modern architecture. But you're doomed to reinvent the wheel over and over again. So you have lots of downsides. And this is why I truly believe that Plone is unique in that market. So Plone is torn between competition that's stuck in the past and web technology that's moving still pretty fast, so that it's hard to keep up. So let's have a look at the Plone roadmap and see how we deal with that tension that we have. So Plone 6.2 will be released at the end of 2025, maybe early beginning of 2026, but we're aiming at 2025. For Plone 6.2, we listen to our users and editors and add small improvements. So no big things, no revolution, small improvements. One of the small improvements is restore unsaved content. When your browser crashes, losing your work is frustrating. And it doesn't matter if it's 2 minutes of work or 2 hours of work, which of course is worst, but still, it's frustrating. So Ian Dorian worked on a new feature to restore unsaved content, and it worked like this. So you have your Plone page, you go to edit, and you add something very important, and then your browser crashes. I simulate that with a reload here. And next time you open the edit page, it asks you or tells you that it has auto-saved content, which is stored in local storage, and asks you if you want to restore it. So you can choose then to restore it. So you click on restore, and then you see your change. You can review it. You can still cancel it, right, if you don't like what you see, but you can save it again. So of course, this is not for big things when you change lots of things, but it's a nice addition for sure. Another nice addition is that we improved the image upload widget. We had lots of different implementations here and there, and we unified that. Ian Dorian, David Ichim, and Victor worked on this. So this is a nice improvement so that you can also, as an integrator, use that widget elsewhere, and is well documented. Another feature that will ship with Plone 6.2 is relative path support. This is important for multi-site setups, or if you want to publish, say, example.com/myorganization as a Volto site. So this will be possible. Nilesh, Claudia, Mauro, Wesley, and David worked on that. And it will be merged in Volto 19 soon. Oh, I forgot the first two things that I mentioned. They're already in Volto 19, so you can already use that when you use Volto 19 instead of the stable Volto 18. And that will be merged soon. Another small enhancement is a blocks control panel. Since blocks become the new thing, you want to know how many blocks you have in your site. Maybe you want to migrate them, or you want to just know how many there are, and where they are used. So Plone 6.2 will ship with a control panel based on the work that Margarita and Fred did in Plone 6.2, the blocks index, and it will ship with a nice control panel where you can see things and where you can check then all pages, for instance, that have a certain block.
And Jonas is building the control panel.
Say again?
Jonas is building the control panel.
Yes, he's working on this week, I think. One last thing about Plone 6.2 is not a feature, but it's really, really important. This is namespaces. Namespaces in Python. So in the Python ecosystem, the way that namespaces are handled within a Python package changed. And to keep those packages compatible with new Python versions and new ZZ Buildout versions that will be released, we have to re-release every single Python package that we have. It's not a big thing, but we have to do releases, and we have to do them all at once. Moritz will give a talk right after mine, Plone Release Manager Moritz von Ries. about the state of Plone backend, where he will tell you all the details about it. Also, if you're interested in what we have in mind for classic UI, please go to his talk and he will tell you all about it. The reason why we'll have the release soon is because that will happen soon, right? But as said, not a big deal. We got your back. We'll do the 6.2 release. And we also have, David worked on a way to use horse, I think, which is a way to switch between both worlds. Say again?
Horse with no namespace.
Horse with no namespace, okay. Okay, because we had to do because of the namespace issue, we had to do the 6.2 release soon. We decided to add another 6.3 release, another 6.x release, which is 6.3, because we have more features that we want to add. So we plan to have another 6.3 release in 2026, maybe at the end. Like Plone 6.2, it will have small improvements. One is listing search block variants. So if you look at the current variants that we have in a listing or search block, so you have a listing block or a search block to list content, and we have different variations there. The existing ones that you know, like summary, view, default, and list, and things like that. And what happens is that, or what we realized when we looked at them from a user point of view with our UX experts, that they have confusing names because they have the old names from Plone and they don't make much sense today, to be honest. And what happens is that you add more listing variants on top of that, which makes it even more confusing because you have lots of variants. So we improved that, or we plan to improve that. Here's an implementation. We have an implementation in Volto Light Theme that we plan to move to the core. And here you see a listing with different content objects, right? You have a page, you have a news item, an image. A news item has the date. If you have a file, you have the file size. If you have an event, you have start and end date. So if you add it, you can go to the block and you have the listing variations. And we changed and unified the variations. So we have variations list with images, grid, and image gallery that you can choose from. So list is I think the old standard view. Correct me if I'm wrong here. List with images is the summary view. And grid is a 2-column grid option. We might add more grid options as well in core. And we have the image gallery, which is a standard image gallery. We'll continue to work on improving the widget structure and improve the link widget. We aim for a more Google-like feature because there are some missing, but it's a slight improvement. One thing that has been around in the Plone community or ecosystem as an add-on is a keyword manager, which is quite popular. In Plone, you have an open vocabulary where you can assign arbitrary keywords to content. And the downside, so this is very flexible, but the downside is that you have typos, duplicates, and then you need to clean up. And this is why you need a keyword manager that allows you to clean up the keywords. So we wrote a plip and we will introduce that feature in core because it belongs in core. And Thomas Mersch is working on this. Another feature that has been around as add-ons, I think we had different add-ons with different approaches, is recycle bin. When you accidentally delete an object, you might want to restore. Lots of systems have this feature and it's a very useful feature. And Rohan started to work on that with the help from David and mentorship. And we're already pretty far with an implementation. So we will be able to ship that with 6.3. So looking at the 6.x branch, the idea is to give you peace of mind. I think what Plone does as a community is pretty unique, that we offer 5 years of support for a major version. So within the 6 branch, 6.0, 6.1, 6.2, 6.3, you will have 5 years of security releases. This means that you have 2 more years to come, at least until the end of 2027, for all 6.x releases. We might extend that depending on when Plone 7 comes out, but this is what we promise. So Plone 6.x is peace of mind, and between stability and innovation, Plone 7 will be the innovation. Plone 7 will come out in 2027, and it will be a lot faster. The editing experience has always been great performance-wise since we moved to Volto. For anonymous users, the performance is also fine. We did lots of improvements there, of optimizations. We have source sets, we have bundle optimizations, we have lazy loading and everything. But the truth is that if you look at Google Web Vitals, and lots of our clients do that, they want to see 100 there, or 90 or something, or even more, which is something that Volto can do easily for desktop, but in mobile it's harder, and Google is always like increasing that, right, or decreasing the numbers actually. So main problem here is the bundle size, and Plone 7 will reduce the bundle size 80 to 90% compared to the Plone 6 bundle. When I heard that, I was like, how are we transforming Plone into a static site generator? Because I'm a bit out of the loop, I have to admit, when it comes to the actual programming, and especially front end. So I was like, are we using static site generators? Because that has been a big trend like a few years ago. And immediately when I asked Victor that question, like my brain was like working, and I was like, why didn't I heard about static site generators in the past years? Why they are gone? And then Victor explained to me that JS frameworks like Next.js and Remix, they became so efficient with React server components and stuff that, no, that's another thing, that's for the next slide. So they became so efficient that, static site generators lose their USP. So they're not that trendy any longer, right? And the cool thing is that with React server components, those optimizations made it into React Core. So when we upgrade to React 19, we get all those benefits. We're not only to upgrade React 19 in Plone 7, but also React Router 7. React Router used to be just like the routing, so if you enter a path, right, it will map that to a JavaScript React component and then call the REST API and map to an object in a database. But React Router evolved into a framework. So React Router 7 is more like Remix or Next.js if you're in the JavaScript community. It does also server-side rendering, lots of other things. So it's far more than just the rendering component. So this will allow us in the future to be also far more flexible in multi-site setups. So we will able to publish subsites under a top-level domain. So if you think about big deployments with lots of like subsites, you can easily publish subsites that you have under a top-level domain, which is pretty cool, among other things. Plone 7 will also be more flexible. Of course, since we have Plone REST API, you can bring your own front end and build a Next.js, Remix, Vue.js, whatever front end you like on top of Plone. But as said, then you're doomed to reinvent the wheel, unless you will have reusable components as your fingertips. So if you want to use different frameworks and you don't want to reinvent the wheel, it's great to have reusable components. Think about the folder contents view, for instance, which has lots of functionality, right? If you could use that, or the blocks rendering engine, or other parts, or the form framework, right? You want to reuse that instead of having to reinvent the wheel here. So by being able, or by introducing those reusable components, we will also reach or accomplish a long-term goal that we had. I think there's an ancient clip about this, to separate the CMS UI from the public-facing UI, because this will make things more efficient and it will also be more flexible. So this is also something that Plone 7 will do. Plone 6 is already WCAG 2.1 compliant for the AA rating, so we're doing quite well for accessibility. But the truth is that the semantic UI library that we're using for widgets and components, we have to bend it quite a bit to make it accessible. So we will completely remove semantic UI in Plone 7 and move to React area components, which are written with accessibility in mind from scratch. Red Turtle is leading the effort on working on this, and we hope that Plone 7 will be the first CMS on the market that's fully accessible, also in the editing interface. That sounds pretty good, right? I mean, the benefits. The question that I had when I heard about this is like, can we do this maybe in small steps, one after another? Unfortunately, the answer is no, because things are related. I told you about React 90 and React Router and everything. So we are rewriting things and we have to do it all at once. The code name for this modernization of the front end is 7. The JavaScript world continues to innovate fast, not as fast as like 7 or 8 years ago, but the fact is that Volto has been created in 2017. Rob, is that correct, roughly? Or 17, right? So 8 years ago. So Volto is 8 years ago. Time flies. And we used the latest best practice back then, right? But 8 years is a long time in the JavaScript world. So we have to move on. But this is a huge challenge for us as an open source community, because if you can't like iterate and do small improvements, someone has to do all the work and you have to do it all at once. So this was a challenge that we accepted at the end of 2024. And for 2025, we planned 5 strategic sprints in 2025. So we had the Alpine City sprint in January 2025, organized by Jens and Christine Klein, where we mainly focused on backend things. In March 2025, Odo Web organized the Bucharest sprint, where we started our work on 7. In May 2025, we had the Beethoven sprint in Bonn, organized by my colleague Jakob Karl. In June 2025, Dante Alvarez organized the Ajolote sprint in Mexico City with those really, really nice shirts. And then in September 2025, Red Turtle organized the famous Salamina sprint. So the good news here is we already have a working prototype of 7. I have one question. Did you notice 2 people that occur on almost all the pictures? Anyone? So person 1 is our Plone release manager, Victor Fernandez de Alba. He will talk today in the afternoon about 7. He's the mastermind behind 7. And he will give you all the insights about it if you're interested in that. So I highly, highly recommend going to that talk. And the second mastermind behind this is Piero Nicoli, the Volto team lead. And he will give a talk about theming Plone 7. So if you're interested in that, please go there. If accessibility is important, I also highly recommend looking into 7 and what we're doing there. Because the cool thing is, as said, that we have a working prototype, so you can get into that and be an early adopter, be an innovator here, right? Because it's all there. But that's not all. Plone 7 will also have an easier and more intuitive theming, and it will come with an improved editing experience. So the code name for this is Block Model 3. So Block Model 3, or our block model, is basically when we introduced blocks, we came up with an HTML structure, JavaScript structure, and we learned over time that there are complex use cases where our current block model has limits. For instance, if it comes to vertical space, so if it comes to horizontal spacing or vertical spacing. If you want to keep the edit and the view in sync, which is what we want, because we want full what you see is what you get, and you get away without code duplication. That's pretty hard. And design systems overall are also hard. This is not trivial. So Dante Alvarez created an anatomy of a block, and that was basically block model 3. So this is an example. You have the view of a test page. I told you that background colors are hard. This is why we created an example here of a simple page with background colors so that you can see it. It's not too complex. And if you go to edit, did you notice that almost nothing changed? No vertical spacings changed. Nothing changed except the slight blue border around the block that indicates where you are. So we improved what you see is what you get a lot. And of course, you still have the sidebar on the right to edit things. What you see here is that you can move blocks up and down. You can still use drag and drop in the sidebar, but being able to move them up and down is important for accessibility. If you change the background color, I think that was, wait a sec, I need to do that again. That was too quick. So I told you that design systems are hard and that background colors are hard, right? So what the system does here is when you change the order, you see this nice animation that the vertical spacing changed. When you change the background color here, you saw that it reduces the vertical spacing there, right? This is because visually you're using the background color to separate parts of your website from each other. So you can either use a separator block or something with white background color, or you use alternating background colors. But if you do so, visually what you do is you add spacing there, right? So this is the design system. And Block Model 3 will allow us to implement such design systems. That doesn't mean that you have to use exactly that design system, but it's it's something that you need if you want to design your own design system. So to sum up things, between stability and innovation, Plone 6.2 and 6.3 will be stability that will give you peace of mind 2 more years to come with security updates. Plone 7 will be the innovation. It will be a lot faster. It will be more powerful, more flexible. It will have a better editing experience, a more flexible theming. It will be more accessible in the edit user interface. And with this community, with this plenty of AI talks, I have zero doubts that we're missing out something, and I'm really looking forward to this conference and to the future of the Plone CMS. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Timo. What an exciting presentation. And now we will have time for some questions, so please raise your hand and Jussi will bring you a microphone if you want to challenge some of Timo's views, or maybe ask something else. Okay, Alexander.
You said Plone is quite unique in the way here we done things. I feel the same, but I always worry if we're looking at the industry. If you have a leader that is really doing great, you see a lot of people copying the concepts. And there are a lot of other CMS out there, and CMS is not the fancy space anymore. But if we are so good, why are there no copies of Plone out there in the way doing that? So do you see that we maybe be in a specific bubble that there is no interlink with other communities? Because if we're seeing things like CMS Garden, there are communications with the other communities. So why we are that unique?
I mean, there's always the risk that you're in your own bubble. And I like the CMS Garden initiative a lot. And I also like talking to other people a lot. For instance, in Dresden, I talked to one of the core developers of Neos. And Neos is quite a nice system. They use pretty similar design decisions. And from what they do, it's pretty similar, actually, what we do in Plone. So about the copying, I would say that if you look at WordPress, Neos, and Plone, they're doing pretty similar stuff, actually. So it's true that nobody is copying Plone, and that is pretty unique. And that you see that also in reviews. So if people from not the community review Plone, they say, hey, they do it in a different way. But the way that I see in the other systems is is either it's super old school, which is bulletproof and works. But personally, I don't think that this is what we should do in 2025. Same as I don't think that you should buy a combustion engine car in 2025. But people have different opinions, and that's fine, right? But on the other side, systems that are doing new stuff, they have interesting concept, and we are looking a lot at that. I mean, we basically looked at Gutenberg and copied the good part of it and didn't copy the rest. So we're looking around a lot, actually. It's just that I think that the fundamental design decisions that we made as Plone community, that's pretty unique. That we say, okay, we don't want the latest, most flexible system on earth that can do everything like WordPress does, but we want to restrict it because we know from our past experience that this is not where we want to go, and we don't want to go in that direction, right? So this was, in my opinion, we made pretty conscious decisions to place Plone where it is today. But you're correct. We're both correct. That's pretty unique, and nobody's copying that. Which is a pity in my opinion.
Hello. I do have a question that's community related, and it basically follows what Alexander just said. Everything is fine, everything is amazing, but I feel like even myself that I'm part of, I'm really active in the community and I know most of people on a first name basis and so on. I feel that if I'm not at the sprint, if I'm not at the conference, I have no idea what the hell is going on. And one thing I noticed last year at Plone conference in Brazil was the fact that the moment we showed Plone to people outside our bubble, they were like, oh my God, this is amazing. It can do so much. And that was it. It was 1 year ago. We did nothing to activate those people and so on and so forth. That being said, do you think that our communication strategy, especially targeting other people in the community first, and then to bring new people to the community could be improved in a way that we showcase this more often to bring more people in or to basically attract their attention?
That's absolutely vital. So before we moved to Volto, I was with one. I was almost out of the community and looking around for fancy new JavaScript frameworks, and I was going to lots of JavaScript conferences, talking to people. I showed people what we were doing and early version of REST API and stuff, and I had the same experience, right? They like what they see, but you have to go there on a regular basis and evangelize people, show them that, make them an offer. Which is what we should do and what we have to do if we want to gain more traction, for sure. The problem with that is that we grow older as a community and as individuals, and also that the communities, so the JavaScript communities and the younger communities, they're pretty different from us in good ways and in bad ways. In good ways, I would say that they're very vibrant, they are very diverse. They do amazing stuff. They have huge conferences. It's great to be there. But every time I went there, I realized that they don't have this community feeling that we had. It's more loose group of people that meet every now and then and show off what they're doing, but they don't have a common goal, which makes sense because it's more diverse if you go to a React conference, for instance, right? But this reality makes it really, really hard because they're so used to innovations and using the latest thing and jumping on that and reinvent the wheel over and over again. That makes it hard if you provide something that's really valuable, but that's just harder to learn. So to sum up, we should go out there, show what we have, and I think people will be amazed. But we need the people to do that. And personally, I don't have the time to do so, to go to other conferences. This is the only conference that I had a chance to go this year, because of personal reasons. So,
Thank you for that.
yeah.
Other questions? I saw hands rising. You don't have to act like Finnish people and be shy, well, although I appreciate it. Victor? Yeah. Yeah. All right. I think you can have more questions privately with Timo and others. So give a warm applause to Timo and let's go get some coffee.